G'day and welcome to the Hunters Campfire Podcast. My name's Mark and along with good mate Ian, we're here to help with all things hunting. If you're looking to start but don't know where to begin, you want to make the most of your next trip away or even plan that hunt of a lifetime, we've got something for you. You'll find our podcasts on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon and plenty of others. And if you want more, head over to our YouTube channel, The Hunters Campfire, where we have plenty of how-to and hunting videos along with the full video production of every podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and good hunting. Well, good morning, guys, and it is good morning. We usually do this at night, so it's an interesting one. So with us today is obviously Jono and Ian and Nick Dametto from North Queensland. G'day, Nick. How are you?
Not too bad.
Mate, do that again.
Thanks, Mark.
Do that again. Do that again.
Holy,
there's a story behind that as well.
That's a good shark.
Well, there we've got our first story. So, how's life in North Queensland?
You know, it's absolutely brilliant this time of year. We're just coming off the back of the peak of winter, and there's no better time to be in North Queensland. We have a lot of southern tourists come up, an influx of the grey nomads, and even the locals love it. It's the kind of time of the year where you can pretend that we do have a winter. You can put a coat on for 5 minutes, but and then, like I said, it's getting back to normal pretty soon. It'll be summer before you know it.
Yeah, well, we're actually in Darwin in 3 weeks.
Yep.
We're landing in Darwin, then leaving Darwin straight away, but we're chasing buffalo in 3 weeks. So yeah,
I'll tell you. We were on a call yesterday, and this is how I was dressed.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and now we're going up to Darwin, and it's gonna be fun. Anyway,
yeah, it was just
all I can say is Darwin has 2 seasons: hot or wet. That's it. It's either raining or you can cut the humidity with a knife.
Yeah. So we're going
to Mataranka.
We're going to Mataranka. That's it. So we land in Darwin, pick up the crew, and head to Mataranka, and we're on a private block there for most of the working week, and then back again. So, and hopefully we'll encounter buffalo, pigs, and various other interesting game. Now you're from Hinchinbrook area, so where are you based actually up in North Queensland? Because that's, it's past the Pine River. Yeah, it's basically North Queensland. So where in that?
So I grew up in a small town which is in the middle of the Hinchinbrook Electorate called Ingham.
Yep.
Predominantly settled by Italians after World War I and II. A very heavily Italian settled community. And I actually live in the northern beaches of Townsville now. So the Hinchinbrook Electorate spreads from the northern beaches of Townsville at the Bowley River and goes all the way up to about Tully Heads and Silkwood. Now that's halfway between Cairns and Carr and Townsville.
Yeah. Because I years ago did the is it the Thorsberg track on Hinchinbrook?
The Thorsborn Trail.
Yeah,
I've done it as well only about 3 months ago with my wife. It's brilliant, isn't it?
Well, yeah, we did. We did it technically in reverse. Most people seem to go from north to south. We went from Lucinda up and then caught the boat back to Cardwell.
Yep.
We got advised to do that because you kind of travel with the same group. If you found a group that you didn't like, you met new people every night because you were walking against them. But caught the train up.
That's right.
Caught the train up. Got a lift to Lucinda and did the island. It was a lovely place.
Hinchinbrook Island, it really is. It feels like you're walking through Jurassic Park in some of the areas there. It's completely untouched. And fly over it with a helicopter and you can really take it into perspective. There's a huge valley in the middle of the island, which, there could be a sports stadium in there or another town and no one would even see it from the coast. It's just massive.
And there's that peak there that has there's a peak on the island and there's a rock pool just below that peak. And,
that's right.
Remarkably cold water.
It is. So you've got Zoe Bay and Mulligan's Falls, and both those are just so picturesque, but some of the cleanest, most beautiful water you'll ever swim in or even drink, just so pristine. And Hinchinbrook Island is actually the largest island national park in the Southern Hemisphere, so it's absolute treasure to have right there.
Yeah.
Not only is the nameplate for Hinchinbrook Electorate, but also having that as one of our main tourism attractions is pretty special.
The only challenge of it is the rats that live in the camps. That's just amazing.
They've actually started building these steel frames to hang all the packs off now. That's the only way to keep the rats out of the bags at night. But they my wife heard them trying to scratch into the tent. Now she didn't let me sleep in the tent with her, and I didn't really want to. I don't like sleeping on the ground. I want to sleep in a hammock. But I had no rat problems, and she definitely did.
Yeah. When we were there, people used to just take plates. This is about, and you'd basically just hang a string and push a hole through a plate, make a little. And hang your packs and everything up but at night you could hear them literally underneath your tent scurrying around and stuff like that because
they're pretty friendly.
Yeah, they want to be part of they want to be part of your camp. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Is this a pest problem or are these a native something?
Oh, they're just a native bush rat. Being opportunists. If you're a backpacker or a bushwalker on the island, you usually got a snack with you, and much easier to come and eat your snacks than go find one if you're a little bush rat, I reckon.
Yeah. And because it's a dedicated trail, you can't just camp anywhere. Everywhere there's like 5 or 6 stops, and
that's
what
right.
you have to do is you basically. You have to kind of say, I reckon I can make this one. So you've got to do a little bit of planning on your hike.
That's right.
And so the rats know that, so they kind of they know where you're going to be.
And it's actually been classified as one of the top 5 hikes in the world. It is absolutely spectacular. Yeah,
really?
It's up there in top 5 hikes of the world. So we encourage people to get over there and check it out. And like I said, it's just pristine, it's untouched, and there's an opportunity for people to get over there and just enjoy something that not everyone gets to.
It's that wonderful. It's the only time I've ever done it, but you're actually hiking on a beach. That's the weird thing. It's not like hikes. You tend to think they're alpine or something like that, but no, you're at sea level hiking along big open beaches. It's quite a nice place. And of course, fishing through the Hinchinbrook Channel.
If you're into barramundi, mangrove jack, and a number of bream species, of course, the Hinchinbrook Channel is home for you.
Yeah.
We get so many people. So the Lucinda boat ramp, we spent a lot of money doing the boat ramp and the car park up recently in the washdown area, and literally people travel from all over the east coast of Australia to come over and check out the Hinchinbrook Channel. It's about 53 kilometres long, and it's just absolutely pristine. There's a couple of big bites in there as well, and it still happens these days. But back in the day, talking 20 years ago, people actually used to have ski races up the Hinchinbrook Channel, water ski races, just very similar that the guys would do down south and ladies would do down south, say on the Hawkesbury River or the Mildura 100 or the Sydney Bridge to Bridge. Imagine doing that with a couple of 6-metre crocodiles up your backside. It's pretty much a motivation not to fall off.
I was thinking sharks, but that's a different type of
bite. I remember when
we've got bull sharks as well. Don't you worry, they'll try to share the meals around.
Well, strange enough, you talk about. Sorry, Ian, go.
I had that when I was getting off a boat up in Darwin, and I was worried about the sharks. And old mate is just stepping off the boat. He was standing on the jetty. He said, "Don't worry about the bull sharks, mate. They're not around here anymore." And you take your first step off the boat. He goes, "The crocodiles ate them all." You start bouncing off as fast as you can.
Well, it's funny you say that. One of the last ski races we had at a place called Taylor's Beach, which is also in the Hinchinbrook Electorate. This is back in 2000. They actually caught 2 large tiger sharks at the front of the beach just before the race, and one had a crocodile in its stomach and one had a turtle in its stomach. So, don't worry about the crocodiles up here. We've got the tiger sharks that are eating them as well.
Strange enough, we're talking about skiing. David Brown from Shooters Union Australia. He said we just did a very short form podcast with him at the Toowoomba Expo.
Yep.
And he made some mention. He said, when you're speaking to Nick, mention water skiing. I said, I'm not going to carry the water for you. If you've got something to say about his skiing, you can do that, mate. But he said hello.
David's an absolute legend, and he does an important job for not only protecting our rights as licensed firearm owners across Queensland, but also for promoting the good work that our recreational hunters do. Yeah,
that's it. We had a really good chat, actually, and strange enough, he turned it around and started interviewing me, which he was the first and only person to do that. But I think that's his normal operating style.
He certainly is a pretty good operator.
Okay. So let's kind of move on. Obviously for us, the Hunters Campfire, hunting, fishing, outdoors is No, I suppose it's what we do. You know,
It's life.
It's life. It's life. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. It's life. It's not a pastime. It's certainly not a financially viable activity like that.
If you just see it as a hobby or a pastime, you don't get any good at it. I'll tell you that.
That's right. So let's get a better understanding of your where you fit into that picture. So if you give us an understanding of your hunting and fishing, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I tell you, my background is I grew up in a small sugarcane farm just outside of Ingham, a place called Hawkins Creek, and as a child, as soon as you hit the age of 10, you're given a daisy and pretty much anything with a set of feathers or stood still long enough, cops a daisy bullet or lead. Unfortunately, things weren't done right, I think, when it comes to hunting back in the day. Like I said earlier, I come from an Italian background, and I always make the joke, I grew up duck shooting, feral pest shooting, pig hunting, those sorts of things. And I always make the joke, if the Italians were here for another generation earlier, we would have probably wiped out every black duck in North Queensland. We come pretty close. But seeing things change in that space, we've seen a lot of the animals actually replenish. I try and talk about crocodiles and black duck in the same sentence because everyone said we've got a crocodile problem here in North Queensland at the moment, and to a point where my party and myself have been advocating not only for the ability to go and harvest some of these crocodiles as recreational hunters, but also an opportunity to try and thin out some of these numbers to make our waterways safer. Now, when I was growing up, we'd go duck shooting when it was still legal in Queensland. I must say that. When it was still legal in Queensland, we used to travel nearly 3-4 hours to go and shoot a duck. That's how scarce they were. Now, same thing. You never saw a crocodile. You never saw a crocodile around the same time because during the 70s we almost wiped the crocodiles out in North Queensland. Now, we're seeing numbers of those animals come back in such large numbers. Now, when it rains, not only do we see ducks walking down the gullies and the water furrows and drains around the small town of Ingham, that's how many of the numbers have come back. Also, crocodiles do the same thing. They're moving around in areas. So we've got to start opening that conversation up, I think, more around whether or not it's time to start looking at, are we able to safely take these species and manage them properly and actually use them as the resource which they could be intended to do. But back to more my hunting background. So like I said, growing up hunting, we used to shoot duck, but also feral pigs and stuff like that for pest management. And something happens when you're young and you go out on your first hunt. And I truly believe every young man or even young women out there should actually get this opportunity. I guess whether it happens on a psychological level or a chemical level, I'd love to see the research on this, but there seems to be a profound appreciation on where your food comes from after the first time you shoot something and then clean it and cook it yourself. It's something I think every human should actually go through that process because, like I said, you actually get a profound appreciation of the food, the resource, and also the management of it moving forward. And I don't think a lot of people that live in cities actually really get that. Therefore, I don't think they really get hunters.
Yeah, we do a lot of mentor hunting through clubs. And one of the comments that was made a year or so ago with a new hunter that we took out, the amount of effort that goes into finding a property, getting to a property, finding an animal, taking an animal, and then caring for that animal after you've shot it so that it can be processed in such a way that you can get it home into the freezer. He said, I had no idea how much care you put into these carcasses once they're so that you can break them down. It's incredible. It's the first time he really experienced that. And I thought that was a great comment, just to back what you were saying.
No, and that's true.
Ask you a different question while I can. The crocodile thing that you talked about a second ago, what would people use them for if they could be harvested sustainably? I've eaten one or a part of one. It's the obvious handbags and belts. what would the recreational crocodile hunting process be?
So the way I see things at the moment is we've got crocodile numbers, which I think at a sustainable biomass level at the moment to be harvested. Now, I think we should be looking at crocodile very similar to barramundi lobster, coral trout. Once we've gotten to a certain biomass level, we should be, and even the other animals that we have in our ecosystem on land, whether it's ducks or any other native animals that we've got on land based as well, getting to a point where we go, okay, well, we've got enough now that we can sustainably remove some of these. So yes, we need to allow some of the recreational hunters to do that, but also making sure that commercial opportunities exist. Now, with the commercial opportunities as well, so for example, there could be a tag system for recreational hunters to go out and take a couple a year. There's quite a financial benefit to the state if they were to run a tag system like that. But also for commercial operators as well, saying, you may have a license to remove 15 crocodiles a year from the ecosystem between 1.5 to 3 meters of length, you know. And the opportunity for not only trophy hunting, which there is quite a large market for that, let's be fair and honest, but also the opportunity for taking those crocodiles that can be processed for meat or sent to crocodile farms to be able to be used. So when I say hunting these crocodiles, not always euthanizing them or hunting them with rifles, but also trapping them could be an opportunity to be removing them to send to crocodile farms, because at the moment, all crocodile management is being left up to the department. There is no third party able to actually go out there and trap crocodile at the moment. So Queensland Parks and Wildlife Services are lumped with that whole responsibility at the moment. And, you can get damage mitigation permits for wildlife removalist groups or businesses to take everything from remove flying foxes all the way through to removing magpie geese, which are a native species, off runways and stuff like that. But you can't get out there and remove crocodiles. So I think there needs to be changes in that legislation.
This is a risk factor, surely. It's not as difficult to remove a flying fox than it is to remove a crocodile for the average punter.
Yeah, but with the right training, with the right ability to get in there and actually educate people on how to do this properly. And, I think if you, if you allowed people to get out there recreationally and remove crocodile, or allowed people, and I'm talking, you're not allowed to legally shoot in a public place at the moment in Queensland. Of course, there's risk attached to that, but you should be able to go to a private property and remove a crocodile recreationally from that area if you've got a permit, I believe, and you've got the permission of the landholder. At this point in time, you're not allowed to do that, even as the landowner. Right now, you could have 30 head of cattle being taken by a crocodile on your property. Unless Queensland Parks and Wildlife want to come down and remove it right now, that's your problem and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, right. Interesting, yeah.
That is. And it's an important point,
as well.
You said, when, when you were young, there was very few duck and very few crocodiles, and now there's, there's, and you can associate that with the fact that there's, the removal of legal duck hunting and removal of hunting of crocodiles. But there's also a fact that things just change. I mean,
That's right.
You talk to property owners, like I've hunted down here in the Downs, and on one property in particular, that family had been on that property for a number of years, and they remember when there was no kangaroos there.
Yep.
There was wallabies and rock wallabies, but sometime in the past, eastern grey started turning up.
Yeah.
And over the period of time, they became the dominant species on that area because, they cleared paddocks, they created permanent water and things like that. So as we continually change the environment around us, and I don't mean destroy it, but actually just simply change it. We're going to see these changes within, and I like that term, biomass. Always trying to learn something in these podcasts.
The reason I use the term biomass, that is how agriculture and fisheries actually describe everything out there in fisheries. So they measure through modelling and some of the statistics they take from recreational fishers and commercial fishers to get an accurate description of what the biomass looks like out there. So usually around 60% total biomass is what they aim for. They like to keep it around that. Anything below 20% biomass, we're in danger with the species, or we need to do something to manage the species differently. They're about to do that with Spanish mackerel, for example. So and there's people out there that don't agree with the modelling and all that sort of stuff. I'm not going to get into that, but if that's the way they manage other species within the fishery, I think we could be applying the same methodology to managing things like crocodile. It makes sense.
Yeah. And what a unique opportunity for Queensland and the Northern Territory. For Queensland. We've just come out of the Outdoor Adventure Expo that was held in Toowoomba and spent a bit of time with DPI Joe, and as he loves to be called now. But Joe, he talks about the $1.9 billion worth of economic value that they have out of the R licence system.
So that's DPI New South Wales?
Here. Yeah. That's just New South Wales here. We don't have that here, obviously, but the crocodile discussion is super unique, and the income that could come in, even to a private landholder, like you say, for an overseas trophy hunter, the Australian crocodile is very unique.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. I mean, people pay to go to Africa.
I've got a friend that does that quite often. He's been around the world and he's trophy hunted nearly everything except a polar bear, he said. And I said, why not a polar bear? And he said to me, Nick, because it's too cold. He's a bit of an elf in the sky, but he's done this legally across the world. And he said, mate, you're missing out on a massive opportunity here in regional Queensland to capitalise on a pest, which right now is creating a very unsafe scenario in your waterways.
And look, that's really a big part of what we talk about a lot. And not only just, I mean, obviously from a unique point of view, there's the crocodile, but nearly all of our videos on our YouTube channel are us hunting in New South Wales, on public land, because we can't do that here. And last hunt was for me was Nundle and I took my son, and 5 days.
And
spent fuel, money on fuel, on food, on all sorts of things over the border, and I paid New South Wales a license and the whole lot.
I guess that's a really good segue, Mark, into some of the work that I've been doing politically since I took office in 2017. Now, we have ruffled a few feathers up here in Queensland when it comes to state forest and unallocated state land hunting here in Queensland. So there are organisations that are allowed to get in there at the moment and do some of that hunting. But I truly believe that we should be following the New South Wales model where we're allowing recreational hunters into these places. Now, there's a huge industry that works off the back of this, and I don't have to talk about the economic benefits to yourself, Mark. You just pointed most of them out. People going out there and spending money on hotel spends and overnight stays, restaurants and cafes, they're buying stuff, fuel, ice, bullets. That's more fishing. But getting out there and spending money in our regional towns, and there's nothing more expensive than going away for a hunting trip. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think my deer is about like $300 a kilo. To be honest, if I was honest, it's about $300 a kilo.
Add another zero.
So sorry to talk about fishing again, but that's why we call it fishing and not catching, because sometimes you don't. Same as when you go out to hunt a deer, sometimes you just don't get one.
That's right, hunting, not shooting.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. But no, I see that there's a huge benefit not only to the state, but also to the economic benefit of our small regional towns. And one problem that the state does have at the moment is, especially in Queensland, Queensland has got this, this drive, the state government at the moment to start, they're buying up national park land. Now, they've bought up a lot of stations west of my electorate that have now been converted back to national park. And unfortunately, the money's not there to actually manage these things. Everyone will tell you in North Queensland the worst neighbour to have, whether you're a farmer, a grazier, or whatever, is the state government in a national park. Yeah. They haven't got the money to do the pest management, the weed management, all these things, right? So there is a way to get in there and actually use recreational hunters to actually start mitigating some of this pest risk, bringing those numbers down in a very controlled way. And like in New South Wales, you create this whole industry when it comes to training people to make sure they're in there ethically hunting, making sure the licensing's being done. So there's plenty of fat in this for the state government. And it also fixes a practical problem they have when it comes to feral pest management.
Yeah, and it also it provides a return on investment that you just don't get. Like, I mean, there is a place for helicopter cull, but if you were to, from a purely dollar point of view, say compare per goat helicopter cull to recreational hunting, the cost of the state government per goat from helicopter compared to the cost of this, it's actually, in a way, it's kind of it's a sunk loss for the hunter and a no loss for the government type of arrangement. So it certainly there is a it seems a ridiculously easy economic argument to understand around this.
Yeah, and I think what happens within government and government departments is they like to really ensure that they're assuming no risk, and doing something that they don't understand and doing something that they haven't done before invites a whole lot of risk in. And one thing I've found with departmental people is they don't want to take on a risk that hasn't been completely debugged, and they understand everything. And I think just saying, we should adopt what's happening in New South Wales, I don't think that's, it's almost like you've got to plate this up for the state government to basically say, well, this is exactly how you introduce this. This is the reforms you need to do. These are the regulatory and legislative things you need to play with. And then this could be actually done. But they know they have a problem. But also, I don't think they want to assume the risk because no one wants to have the finger pointed at them when something does bugger up.
You've got to wonder at what point, though, they look at the statistics. So there is a process down south that works, and there's been 0 deaths or major incidents in the many years that our licence has been running.
Yes.
Victoria, they may have had different successes, but by and large, the risk isn't there.
No.
2 big states in Australia are functioning quite happily, so you sort of think that you can write the argument off to other statistics, but it's still a struggle for people. Many people have tried.
Yeah.
Interesting to see how to have another run at it at some point.
Yeah, and the risk thing is very interesting when you talk about that, because if you look at it from a risk point of view, you would actually assume the risk would be greater in New South Wales because of literally kilometres to density.
Yep.
And when you got to Victoria, you would think the risk would be even greater again because the most, second most populous state, smaller state.
It's very alpine alpine regions.
And again, it's density. Whereas here, you're actually, you'd have a much lower rate of, per hunter per square kilometre type thing. But you're dead right. I mean, risk is to be avoided at all costs, and that's it. And so it's easier to do nothing than it is to consider what you might be able to do.
I think when you talk to people within departments that have no idea what we do out there in the space we operate in, they probably think of the ugly scenes, of the 90s of places like Polithanga, for example, the big shoots they used to have in the southwest of Queensland, where unfortunately you had green groups out there trying to scavenge the ducks and try and save them while the hunters were still hunting, and it was ugly scenes, and that's perhaps one of the things that they're trying to avoid here. So I don't know what the answer is for them, but I know that we can play a huge part in trying to work through that space with them.
Yeah, I always think of that scene out of Wake and Fright. When people realise I'm a hunter, they think I'm in Wake and Fright. I'm top of a ute running around a paddock at night shooting kangaroos with a bottle of rum in my hand. It's just that's what people associate with, and there is the term social license is
I love
often
that.
Used around that.
The big part about that, Mark, is now that may be how things were done 30 years ago. Let's be fair and honest. We have come a long way, and just like we all now have to have a social license, I believe, in whatever we do, I also believe people have developed what I call an eco-conscience. The kind of people that right now, they don't throw their cans out the window of the car while they're driving along, or, their McDonald's pack. Obviously, there's still people that do that sort of that rubbish. But most people that are hunters these days, or class themselves as hunters, they class themselves as ethical hunters, and they have an eco-conscience when it comes to protecting not only what they're doing out there in the environment, they're in tune with the environment, but also making sure that the species that they do hunt is there for the future, so that their sport has a legacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very true. Very, very true.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want my kids to be able to go out there and see these animals and enjoy them as I do. And yes, hunting is part of what we enjoy, but we get to spend time with them in nature and enjoying it. So I want them to be able to do that too, and my grandkids.
And something special, and I think this is why I think so many people are getting into hiking and bushwalking these days, and that's sort of come off the back of COVID when, a lot of the major things in the cities were sort of shut down, people looking for new things to do on the weekends. But, hunters have enjoyed the outdoors for such a long time where something special happens. You become in tune when you start listening. You start feeling the environment. You start smelling the bush. You really get in tune with it, and you need to be that if you're a good hunter. But also, I see that there's a lot of psychological benefits to that and social benefits.
No, most definitely. I regard, the way I describe it is that you actually become a participant. If you can either be an observer, and it's all very glorious and pretty to go to a lookout and look over an escarpment or something like that. But when you hunt, you're actually a participant in that environment. Then all of a sudden, your role changes.
That's correct.
And you also realise how how inefficient you are as a human compared to other animals. You realise, okay,
you're about 5 out of 100 compared to some of those critters out there.
Yeah, that dumb deer has spotted me like 3 days ago. Knew I was leaving the hound before. It's heard me, it's smelt me, it's seen me.
Exactly.
It's figured out what it's all about, all before I even know what's going on. So it's very humbling in that way as well. So it's about being a participant. And again, fishing allows you to do that. You can go to the water's edge and observe, or if you fish, all of a sudden your whole role changes in that perspective.
Well, talking about changing roles, I'm going to ask yourself a question now, Mark. Maybe even John might be able to John might be able to chime in here. One of the things I think personally, coming from a hunting and fishing background, that I think has damaged both sports is the ease of finding locations through GPS. Now, when I grew up hunting, you needed to go out with one of the older guys that would show you where to go, show you where the dams are, show you where the water holes are, or in fishing, show you where the fishing spots are, and you'd have to figure out how to find them on a map, and you'd have to find, or a chart, and you'd have to negate yourself backwards and forwards from that area. Now, everyone seems to be able to just drop a pin on Google Maps and go to wherever they think would be a good hunting spot. And I think that really has taken an element away from the sport, which I really enjoyed, but also I think protected the sport as well.
I suppose expanding it, all technology does kind of make things a little bit easier, and we get into this conversation all the time, and you could probably start with, is a scope rifle easier to shoot than an open sight rifle?
Yes.
And then you get into the arm wrestle with the bow hunters, and then the bow hunters get into arm wrestles with the traditional bow hunters, who get then an arm wrestle with the, stick bow hunters, and then they get the arm wrestle with the guy with the slingshot. So you get that whole range of technology, and then you get into thermals and all that stuff. Specifically about GPS and e-scouting, one of the real challenges about public land hunting, and this is 14 years of public land hunting, there is no one there to tell you what to do.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, there is no one. There's no cocky who owns a place. There's no friendly forestry guy who'll say the deer are down here. You are completely on your own unless, you go with someone who knows, the space. Yep. So one of the great joys of public land hunting is literally, here is your acreage. Go for it and find what you can. And so in that instance, e-scouting only gives you an idea of where to go. It helps you kind of say, kind of like if you were looking at you were standing on the beach and you're looking at the beach and you went, that wave action tells me there's a gutter there, so I'm going to cast there rather than just cast out into the open. So and in New South Wales, the GPS is far more about making sure you get out than it is about making sure you go out. You go into the forest. It's about making sure you can come back out of the forest again. So you're using the GPS much more as a navigational device rather than a game location device. Private land's different because you have different structure and things like that, and you can. I hunt private land a lot here in Queensland, and the first thing I do is I talk to the landowner, and you'll go, I've seen those bastards up on the hill up there, and all of a sudden, okay, I know where to go, and you can put trail cams out, even though trail cams don't tell you where they are, they tell you where they've been, unless you've got some way of seeing it in live action. So look, that's one of the great questions about technology and how you use technology. And thermal hunting's probably the most current one.
Yep.
You know, I don't know if you've ever used thermal.
I haven't had an opportunity, but I've seen some lovely thermal videos, and
Yeah.
I think they're just
And
brilliant. But
the thing with
I'd chuck another spin on that altogether. I know where you're going with that, and I think it's a super fair question. But in Queensland, because we have limited accesses to locations to hunt, even if you join a club, that cagey old bugger who's been hunting and he's had access his entire life is still not going to tell you where to go. And he may not invite you onto that piece of land either. So those that are new to the sport or the pastime or the hobby or whatever you want to call hunting, they're being enabled by technology to go out and get into the sport because they can now see where to go and have a look at and do some research and feel more confident. Those that came to clubs before, unless they were handheld into the bush, they probably didn't really make a start. Now, if I think about the growth in deer population, pig population, game population in general over the years, but if I think about, Samba, back in the whenever it was, when they were, they weren't as abundant as they are now. Fallow, very similar, reds as well. So those populations have grown as well. So now we're combating population growth potentially with technology. But I think the one thing that we need as hunters is more hunters. We need more people competing for the game. So we've got more voice and more ability to affect change. And I think technology enables new people to get into the sport.
I think with off the back of that technology and enabling more people to get into the sport, which I completely agree with being a great thing, needs, I think, then come with, and this is what's being done in New South Wales, I understand, with hunting on state land, is the courses that come with that, the licenses that come with that. And while we are enabling people right now to go and hunt through technology in Queensland, we're missing that in Queensland when it comes to the legislation. So that's what I wanted to circle around to. Part of the problem that we do have, I think, with enabling people with technology is those new people to the sport or the recreation, whatever you want to call it, aren't being taught some of the, the code of ethics and the ethical side of things that come with that. And I think that is a place that I think government needs to start playing. They need to acknowledge that people are getting into these areas, whether you like it or not, because of the technology. And because of that, you have a responsibility to mitigate some of those risks that come with that by licensing and also making sure people are accredited to do so.
Very true.
Very true.
Yeah.
I mean, so speaking of the accreditation piece, I spent 12 years living in the UK. I moved from South Africa to the UK, and whilst not compulsory, they offer a education program called the deer stalking certificate. So there they call it stalking, not hunting. And there's different levels. So level 1 is basically, it's all about the legal aspect, all about the deer species, how to treat the animal, once it's been, breaking down the carcass, from being able to introduce that into the food chain. We had to do a species identification test, a sex identification test. We had to do a shooting test, all of this. And at the end of it, you got a certificate. And it got to the point where a lot of the properties you were hunting on stipulated you had to have that certificate. So there's an option for state government to say, right, well, if we want to allow this, only level 1 or level 2 hunters are allowed on, and you have to pass the certification. So that's a way to making sure that people are adequately trained and educated before they're allowed on
de-risking the situation.
There's also a really big circle in here too, which is, and Nick, you spoke about your, how you came into to be involved. For a great many people we talk to, and look, to be honest, me being one of them, there isn't a traditional role model that you can follow. So we are talking a lot to guys who go, I would love to go hunting, but other than what I've seen on, a video game or on TV, I've got no experience of that. And I have no one in my wider family who I can, I don't have that uncle who's a bit kooky and does a lot of hunting, or, lives in his boat. People don't have that. And so these kind of things that you're talking about, programs, all that stuff, are also really, I think, really important to actually start to build that culture.
I agree.
Because if you don't, there is, if we kind of look at New South Wales and I suppose even more Victoria, and you look at Queensland hunters, and not to disparage anyone, but because hunting is kind of a cultural activity in there's a different kind of thought process around hunting. Yeah, there's still poachers down there, and there's still people breaking the law, but people tend to look at hunting as a cultural activity, whereas a lot of people we talk to, they're just kind of dying to get going. You know, they you know, and if you kind of look at it from a psychological point of view, you know, it has Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the bottom is you know, food, shelter, water. Our hunters are you're in there in the food, shelter, water section. You know, we just want to get going. We just want to get access.
And I think psychologically too, I think we should be allowed to get out there and do these sorts of recreational activities. You know, it's part of our psyche. We're a hunting, gathering group of species that have forever and a day survived on this. And, you know, we've only really changed the way that we've operated as humans over the last, say, 50 years. You know, 50 years ago, unless you lived in a major city, most people owned a rifle in Australia, and most people had shot something, whether it was for feral pest management or to simply eat. And that was when I was brought up, although, you know, when we were a little bit younger, you run around for daisy shooting toads and all those sorts of things. But after I was taken hunting for the first time by my dad and his mates, from now on, son, you only shoot something to eat it, or as pest management. They were the two things. You better want to eat that, or it better be a bloody pest. And I think that's the difference. When you learn those sorts of things, your whole mindset changes. So then, like you were saying before, Ian, you start learning, well, how do I make sure that I'm preserving this animal when I'm taking it? How am I making sure that the meat's going to be fine for when I clean it? How am I going to make sure that, you know, this trophy is going to be in a condition so that the taxidermist can do something with it? All these things. And I think psychologically, so many people in the cities these days have missed out on that, have missed this step, and therefore I think have started to lose a little bit of our, I guess, identity. Yeah,
look, it's incredibly, you know, you're right on there about that. When I used to, I remember on Saturday mornings going out to Belmont, and I used to talk to an older bloke out there, and when he found out I worked for the railways, he told me the story that when he was a kid, he used to catch the train with the single barrel 12 gauge shotgun out to the last station down there at I think it's Rosewood down there, get off the train and just walk up the old corridor, because that's where the train terminated, walk up the old corridor and shoot rabbits on that corridor for food, and then walk back to the station, and the trains would marshal there, and after a while the guards got to know him, and they used to literally invite him to sit in the guard box with them on the train back to Brisbane, because he lived at Wilston. And they'd give him, you know, they'd feed him, you know, hot tea and cold biscuits if he gave him a rabbit or two type thing. And that was, you know, not, you know, that was like in the 50s. You know, it's not like, you know, ye oldie times. This was, you know, just before electrification of that long. So, you know.
Now, if it doesn't come vacuum sealed, no one knows.
You'd be struggling to find a 50-year-old in Brisbane or Sydney right now that could skin a rabbit while hanging it off the back fence of a tree. No, you're right.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think the other thing, while we're on this topic, that technology sadly is enabling, and that is what's the term they use it? The now generation activity, where, you know, I can be licensed and approved to go and hunt immediately without any of that additional support. And I think having courses that people can work through gets them into clubs and gets them mentorship and gets them the support that they need to be able to go and do it safely. And you're right, it would mitigate a lot of that concern for risk, I think. Because
that's where your mental hunting comes in.
It's easy to go and grab a GPS or do some e-scouting and put a pin on somewhere. But unfortunately, a lot of these new hunters, that's still not enough. They actually want the GPS and they want your pin location.
That's right.
You've been there before, so you can verify this deer.
They want to.
It's not even going and looking for it themselves.
So they want to e-tag on the deer so they can track it for.
Well, I guess while we're talking about technology and I guess that new generation of hunter, one thing that I've actually spoken about publicly, and I may have ruffled a few feathers on this, but I said, when I was brought up hunting, it was you didn't tell anyone where you were going. You didn't tell anyone where you'd been, and you hadn't been anywhere all weekend. And then you got invited on the next, hunt. We've now got a generation that wants to video and film every single thing that they do, and they then feel like they need to put that up on social media. When it comes back to this ethical hunting, and also there's a group of people out there, and we've got to be open to this. There's a group of people out there that don't want us doing the things that we do out there because they either ideologically don't agree with it, or they don't understand it. Either way, they don't want us out there. So therefore, I think every hunter does have a responsibility when they, and I'm not against hunting videos, and I'm not against the videos being up on YouTube, but we need to be very mindful of what we put up to make sure that it is ethical and it is legal.
Yep. Most definitely, and
absolutely
100% agree. And Aldo Leupold said that. He said, you should hunt, because when he was talking about ethics, he said, you should hunt like someone's actually watching.
Absolutely.
So don't hunt like, I can do this because no one's watching. No, you should be thinking everyone's watching. So what am I going to do? And I always found that to be a really powerful way to describe that. So if you make a video, and that's what we do, look, we make videos. We're going to make a video that someone's going to look at. So we've got to think about everything around that. And we've had many a discussion about, okay, how might someone interpret this video, So it's about, and I actually think that's it's actually, obviously Ian referred to the now generation, and we've had, unfortunately, people poach simply so they could have the best head photo on on Facebook or Instagram, and there's actually real life cases where that's happened. But being able to look at that video critically and go, okay, what message am I actually portraying here? Am I portraying a positive message? Now, some people are never going to see it as a positive message, and okay, sure. But some people from New South Wales will never play rugby league, but we have to deal with that.
After the last Origin, gentlemen, I don't think they should play rugby league.
We have to accept these things. We have to accept these things. But so presenting that image is a still image, your language, whatever it is, like people are going to actually look at it and actually think about it, is actually a really good it's a really good filter to run everything.
No, you're right, Mark. And whether it's YouTube, whether it's other platforms, whether it's social media like Instagram or Facebook or even TikTok, how you project yourself is completely up to you. And that's exactly how the world's going to perceive you. So you can choose exactly what you put up. You don't have to put everything up. So if you want to make sure that people do believe and understand what you're doing is ethical, then make sure you're putting ethical things up. If you want to carry on like a Yahoo and be prosecuted as such in the public eye, then continue to do that stuff. But I think we're all trying, if we want to do the right thing, and I think everyone in this room is, we need to project a positive and an ethical image for what we all do.
Personally, to me, it's about, and it is a creation activity because it doesn't exist, but creating a culture of hunting, and and in the positive sense of what a culture is. So, if we look at subcultures within our society that are positive, it's because we see them as positive. We might not see what happens in the background, but what we physically see or interact with is positive, and that's what we need to do. That's what we need to be aware of as hunters, And if you want to, as you said, if you want to post stuff on you man a goose, well, gooses usually end up in the pot. So that's a good way to think about it. If you want to actually present something positive, then think about it that way. Totally
Well,
agree.
Talking about pots, Mark. Has everyone got a favourite recipe for whatever they're game hunting out there? Ian, what do you like to cook?
Oh, for me, I like belt.
You've heard of my world famous never been beaten goat curry.
I look forward to trying this at some stage. There's nothing like a good goat curry.
Oh, it's unbelievable! It's great. It's the thing that made me decide that deer weren't the only species to hunt. I tried a goat curry. Man, these are actually worthy. And now I treat them just
goat meat's beautiful. The Greeks do a lot of around the region here. Do a lot of beautiful roasts, but also goat on the spit style meals. Yeah, just goat meat's lovely if prepared and looked after well.
Yeah, the other one that we do a lot, and I forget what the term is, where you slice the meat
like a sashimi almost.
Jerky.
Yeah, like that, and then we roll it in a piece of blue cheese and just pan-sear it, or barbecue-sear it, and that is the best.
Oh, lovely.
Our friend Andrew Day, who's been on this podcast, calls them vegan converters, and he's known to do just that.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. How about yourself, Mark?
Thoughts?
Look, to be honest, this is my weak point. I'm way up at the production end. I'm the hunter and the gatherer. When I get here, it starts to slow down. So generally, I do things like minces and various things like that. So I've got a good mincer, and we've got a mince formula that we use. The boys, we have a thing called Dad's Best Burgers, which are venison burgers. That's a big treat around here. And so there's 20 odd kilos of venison in the freezer at the moment, and usually a couple of fish in there as well. But to be honest, I feel that I'm a bit lacking in the cooking department, so I don't want to take any spotlight.
Well, John's probably got a great recipe there he'd like to share.
Oh yeah, go on, bring it up again, Jono.
For me, I'll go back to my heritage and make biltong. That's my favourite.
What's that other weird sausage that you keep bringing up?
Porfighter.
That's the one.
I'll explain that.
Have you heard of the porfighter? So the porfighter is it's a puff adder, which is a type of snake in South Africa, obviously. But there's a dish that that's made in South Africa, which is the heart, liver, and kidneys finely chopped up with a bit of onions and spices, and then you stuff it into the it's called the fet datum, which is the colon or the large intestine, and then you stuff it in that, and then you cook it on the open grill and then on the fire. It's an acquired taste.
That's the round one.
Yeah.
No, that's boerewors. That's the one you're thinking of as boerewors, which is the a very large sausage. But yeah, the porfighter we're going to have to do one day. Yeah, they do. But for me, biltong, that's my favourite to make. The kids love it. The dogs love it. Everyone loves it.
Well, coming from an Italian background and an Italian heritage.
And yourself?
It was very funny. A lot of the Italians that settled in the area that I grew up in, they came out after World War I and II. And you got to remember, war-torn Italy meat was scarce. You know, a lot of the Italian dishes didn't even have meat. They were very vegetarian-style dishes. So when they got to Australia, you know, there was everything from bandicoot to black ducks to shoot and everything in between, right? So meat was plentiful, and every Italian family in the Herbert district or the Hinchinbrook Electorate would have a black duck spaghetti recipe, which they all believe is their very best, of course. But every family's got their own recipe, and that's something that we've mastered. And you know, it'll take you nearly 2 days to cook a good black duck spaghetti and let everything fall off the bone, and then make the handmade pasta and roll it and put it through the machine yourself, and a bit of Parmesan cheese, gentlemen. And
God, I'm looking forward to getting up to that.
I reckon we're going to have goat curry and black duck spaghetti when you get here.
Well, we'll bring the curry because I want to get some finger marks.
We'll take you to the end of the Lucinda Sugar Jetty next time you're up here to catch those finger marks. It's the longest jetty in the southern hemisphere. It's absolutely massive, 5.8 kilometres.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Hey, good question for you then. Do you have any major objectives that you want to chase in your hunting world? Like, have you got a major passion that sometime in your life you've got to go and track down that elk or that moose?
You know, I now that I'm in the hot seat to have legislative influence and reform here in the state of Queensland. At some stage, I would love to get to a point where I can use my own 44 Magnum, which is a category H here in Queensland, to go and shoot one of those crocodiles out there. If I can get to that point, I'd be bloody happy with that. I know we're probably a far cry from that now, gentlemen, but everyone's got to have a dream, right?
Now, just remember, we will be the camera crew on that one, so you need to make sure you do that properly, because we will be.
I think a lot of things have got to change legislatively to get ourselves to that point. But like I said, everyone's got to have a goal and everyone's got to have a dream, right?
That's it. Why not? That's perfect.
Right. So then, not that we want to go too far back into the R license and why we don't have it thing, but where do you see we are? What are the chances, and if there's a message to get out to listeners, what do they need to be doing, or what should we be doing to try and promote or push or raise a voice? Something's got to change at some point. Someone with expert knowledge like yourself.
One thing that I've learnt over the last 5 years of being in state politics is the state government, and it doesn't matter which party's in power. Every party that's in power at the time has really one objective, and that is staying in power. Every opposition party wants to be in power. And the only way you control the parliament is having the numbers. And that's winning enough seats across Queensland or whichever state you're talking about to hold government. So the only way they win seats is by having enough people vote for them. So the larger we can grow our organisations or associations when it comes to recreational hunting, the bigger and larger voice and more influence we have on those members of parliament. So I encourage people, whenever a petition does come up, and we have run a state forest hunting petition in the past, which we had only 20,000 people sign. We also had the deer hunting petition that's recently run. That's getting some good numbers at the moment as well. Get online and make sure you're actually signing those petitions, those e-petitions, because they show the state government of the day that there actually is this large block of voters out there that are willing to shift their vote on this type of policy. You can also do something very practical. Meet with your local members of parliament. Go down there, and they're supposed to be your voice in parliament. Ask, and even some cases, if they're a bit stubborn, demand to have a meeting with them. Sit down and actually put across your views to your member of parliament. Because if they're doing their job right, they should be taking either your voice into parliament or your objectives or views into their party room for discussion.
Look, about the e-petition, because
Thank you.
and I signed both. One of the one of them, was the first one.
It was massive.
One. It was the biggest one.
Yep.
It was the biggest one ever,
was the big
wasn't
one.
it? It was huge. One of the not a criticism but comment is how effective are they? And I think
it's a good question.
Do they hear those? Obviously, just because someone hears it doesn't mean they
no,
they
it's
accept
true.
it.
That's very true.
It's called. We all experience a situation where you say something and it gets completely ignored. But
and to follow that, Mark, as well, Nick, before you answer it, my understanding is that if the petition's over a certain size, then it has to be tabled for discussion, or at least tabled. But and to Mark's point, does that mean that they go, yes, we recognise that you've got this petition, it's over there in the corner and we're not looking at it? Is there... Because that is the general feeling, I think, of people that I talk to is just another one of those that they don't read. What's the point? So that's
I'd probably answer that in two parts. So years ago, if a petition actually reached 10,000, it triggered a debate in Parliament. That no longer is the case, unfortunately. The standing orders changed last term, and the state government changed that. So it doesn't actually trigger a debate in Parliament anymore. But what every e-petition does warrant is, after being tabled, a response directly from the minister whose portfolio it lands in, right? So every petition will get an answer from the government. Now, we can do a number of things here. So people might say, all right, so what are these petitions like? Do they actually listen to them? Well, sometimes they do, especially in marginal seats, because they can actually pull these petitions apart and actually see how many people have voted for this in certain seats across Queensland, going off your addresses, right? You start pulling that apart and you look at marginal seats, for example, and you might have the Labor Party or the opposition that might be going, oh, hang on a sec, we really want to win the seat where there's only 300 or 200 votes in. So we really need to see where we can start picking up these votes for changing our policy and our regulations and legislation. And the only other option really is just sitting silent on this stuff and expecting something to happen. Good luck if you think that's the solution. So at every opportunity, whether it's through making your voice heard through YouTube conversations like this, direct conversations with members of parliament, having lobby groups actually sit down with members of parliament and ministers, having members of parliament that aren't in government working with you, like I am right now, to try and get a message in the Queensland Parliament. They're all important. They're all important levers to pull. And it's funny, when things do change, I love the saying that, success has many fathers and failure has none. Unfortunately, as soon as something gets over the line, everybody did it, right? Everyone did it. I never use the word I in any of the work I do. I always use the word we. Because it is a collective. It really is. And to be fair, you don't know what the straw that broke the camel's back to open the floodgates on legislative change comes from.
That's right. I mean, that's saying, it takes 10 years to be an overnight sensation.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. It does sound to me, though, that there's some smarter activity that can be done around petitions. Well, I'll start that again. It sounds like there's some smarter things that we can do around the petitions in understanding where those soft targets are, understanding where the soft points are for the government of the day, and making sure that we get the response out of those marginal areas that we need. Because if it's just put it out online and hope, then we're not doing the best we can. And that's a very good way to
Well, one thing that I made sure we did with that state forest petition was making sure that we, you don't just raise the petition and hopefully it does its own thing and it'll just go through Facebook and then create its own sort of, heartbeat and run on its own steam. You really need to be specific on what the petition wording is. And then you need to be also able to create and draw out a narrative off the back of that, but also then a full campaign needs to be had. So, making sure that every hunting organisation or hunting association or group is willing to push that as well, but also getting that, like you said, in the media into those marginal seats so people in those areas do sign them.
That was the next question I was going to ask you about petitions. Should they be, open or more specific? So you think the more specific the ask,
exactly.
The better the petition?
Any question. So a petition is essentially a question you're asking a minister on behalf of, whether it's 200 or 200,000 petitioners. It's a question you're asking a certain minister. So you want to kind of corner that person into being very direct and not so overlaying or broadcasting when it comes to answering that question. So you're really cornering them and wedging them.
Yep. Yep. Understand what you mean. Just like, So rather than, and because often you see that in a petition, it's kind of wide ranging and it's this person's thought process. And there's lots of points where they can say, no. You actually want to say, do this.
Exactly.
Yes, no type thing.
Or even asking a question. So one of the questions you could ask, for example, is, off the back of the success of New South Wales and Victoria's, hunting programs and recreational hunting activities, would the Queensland government adopt a similar process? And if not, why? Asking a very specific question like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Straight line question. Sounds very good. I thought we should probably introduce the fact that you're not only a member of Parliament, that you represent CAP, and talk a little bit about CAP. So I know that there's you and is Robbie Catter and
Knuth.
Shane Knuth or Knuth.
It certainly is.
Railway man. I think him and I were there at the same time.
Back in the day when you were knocking in the spikes by hand.
There's... No, mate, I've never knocked in spikes. I was in the head shed.
I reckon Shane would have been where there was smoke as well. I always give him a bit of stick about that. But Shane actually was a great footballer back in the day. Played in the Foley Shield and all those sorts of things in Queensland, which is sort of the highest sort of league sort of ranks back in the day. One thing that people always ask me, you're part of Catter's Australian Party. How did this sort of eventuate? How did you get to this point? And, I wasn't even looking to get into politics. I was pretty happy. My background, I'm a mining and construction worker. I'm a fitter boilermaker by trade. I'm actually a really good fitter that probably shouldn't weld. I should never say I'm a dual trader. But my background was mining and construction. Took me all over the Northwest Mineral Province in Queensland here and over to Western Australia into the Pilbara region. I ended up coming back probably about 7 years ago now and decided that I was going to start my own small business where I was running jet ski tours out of the Breakwater Marina here in Townsville, which is probably one of the best jobs in the world. Probably took about a 2/3 pay cut, but I was going from kicking red dirt and rocks every day and eating flies to watching dolphins jumping out of the water and people running around on jet skis in their board shorts and bikinis. Out of the blue, I got a phone call from the Honourable Bob Catter. Now, anyone that's ever met Bob before, it's a very flamboyant character. It's a character that you've large in life. And he actually rang me out of the blue and said, Nick, we really like what you're doing. We like your background. We think you could be the right suit for running for a seat of parliament for us. Are you interested? And I met Bob in person after that. To discuss the option, and I said, probably not, Bob. I'm pretty happy doing what I'm doing at the moment. Business is starting to turn a dollar, as most do after the first couple of years, and left it at that. Well, 2 days later, I met Robbie Catter, his son, and probably one of the most charming bastards you'll ever meet. And when I say charming, just a nice bloke, It's sickening how many people just like Robbie Catter. I do too, and I sort of said, mate, if I get to work with you on a daily basis, more than happy to put my hand up. And one of the reasons I went with CAP, not only because they asked me, but after I went through, and now a lot of parties these days, in my view, don't really stand for much. They sort of just go with public opinion. I think that's the demise of the Liberal and National Party right now. The Labor Party does a very similar thing. Instead of standing with their original core values and principles, they sort of just go with what the public wants. And I didn't want to go with a party like that. I went with a party that has, a core values and principles that we stick with every day. And instead of, just picking people, that are popular to run for that party, they actually pick people that are of the same opinion as them. I haven't had to learn to love hunting. To be part of the Catter's Australian Party, they picked someone that did love hunting. And people often ask us, we're fearless when we actually advocate for the firearms industry and the safe ownership of and the licensed firearm owners' rights in Queensland and Australia, because we actually truly believe in it. We don't go out as gun for hire when we're looking for people to back our party. We believe in this. We're going to do this anyway. And if you want to back us, we invite you to come along with us. And that's what I really like about them. Yeah.
Okay. So, it's interesting, way Queensland Parliament structure, but you guys are, whilst you're not a micro party, you're not a major, you've got gravity around you. So, what's that like?
Yeah, it's interesting because,
and this is political Mark, who's far more interested in this stuff than he should be. So what's that actually like with you guys? You obviously there's a connection directly to Bob Catter, but, by family and by name, but there's actually three of you, so you must create some level of gravity.
That's
around
right.
That.
So we sit on the crossbench in the Queensland Parliament, and the interesting part about being on the crossbench is you're not in government, but you're not in opposition either. So you're on the crossbench. So one thing that we've done with that position is we've tried to create a very credible space for us to operate in, and we don't just bash government when they're every day of the week. We bash them when they're doing the wrong thing, and we pat them when they're doing the good thing, right? And that's where I think we've actually started building a lot of really good credibility, not only in our seats, but in the Queensland Parliament as well. When we say that government's not doing a good job, they usually aren't. We're not just saying it because we're not part of that party. Now, in 2015, the state actually went into a hung parliament where Robbie Catter and Shane Knuth actually held the balance of power for some time with other crossbench members. Now, that gave them a huge bargaining chip and helped them deliver certain things for Queensland, and not only regional Queensland, but for their own electorates. Now, the parliament we're in at the moment isn't tight, but both sides value us as a long-term strategy, because I think at some stage, statistically, we're going to be in a hung parliament again. And I think the LNP recognise that, but so does the government and the Labor Party at the moment. So we do get access to both sides, and I guess respect from both.
Because, I mean, you technically are the
and we're the I'd say we're
party,
the
aren't you? Because you got more. Yeah. You got more than the Greens, and you got more than One Nation, and there's one independent at the moment, 2 Greens, and the One Nation gentleman, Stephen Andrews. Now, that's right. So you're actually the third party, as it were, in terms of,
and not only that, in North Queensland, we're the opposition. If you want to go for numbers, so. Break it down like that. So when we talk, and especially North Queensland, people's ears prick up, and it's a growing brand. We take a common sense approach on a lot of things. We've actually worked really hard on that over the last 3 years to make sure that we are showing people that we are not only what we may have been in the past, to protest or to vote, but actually a safe place to park your vote in the future.
Yeah, it's really quite interesting how that's developed over time, and to see that develop. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, for one of the challenges, if you don't live in an area where you can, you have a clear vote in terms of for your lifestyle, which is me. I live in I'm in Greenland, as it were. How do you as someone who likes fishing or hunting or 4-wheel driving, and how do you
exercise your democratic right and make.
How do you do that if at the voting booth you don't have that option? The option's not there from a voting point of view. So how might you do something more generally, or how do you work around?
One thing that I do ask people to do, and if. I'm not saying that people that are watching this YouTube video should rush out and support the KAP or Katters Australian Party or even join the party, but I do ask people to go out and have a good look at all the other parties and what they're doing, including us. And if you find a party that does suit your lifestyle and does suit the things that you're interested in, start supporting them. Become a financial member, become a member of the party, start advocating in your area for the work that they do. You may not, and we do think we're a smaller party with a smaller budget, so we do have to be quite strategic on what and where we spend our money on. So during election campaigns, we have been quite strategic in the last 2, where we'll actually run in seats in regional or North Queensland, mainly because we actually we need to build off our strengths. We would love to have a party at some stage that could run on the Gold Coast or in Brisbane somewhere. That is really part of the gold. But at the same time, we need to be strategic at this point. And just because you live in Brisbane and you may not be able to vote for us at the next state election, doesn't mean you can't support us in other ways. And like I said, joining the parties or that you're interested in, or even predicating that message that they are putting out there, is all a helping hand.
That's good advice, because I mean that's it. That one of the things that again you talk to people that go, I don't know who to vote for, because every election you'll get on Facebook, say SSAA, or someone will say, here's our preferred voting list, or they don't say that because they can't say that, but they would kind of do this scan of the parties, and a lot of people go, but I live in such and such, and that's just not an option available to me. So what do I do? But as you say, just get involved, even at any level. And that's what we're all about, get involved.
A movement and a message and getting that out there. And one of the things I also have, I have soft political conversations all day as well as heavy ones, but I'll turn up to the pub and there'll be 4 or 5 young lads sitting around the bar together, and I'll walk up and say, how you going, lads? I'm Nick Dametto. And they'll go, hey, Nick, we don't want to talk about politics. Well, that's fair enough. I don't want to talk about politics either. So what do you love? I love me pig hunting, love me shooting, I love me fishing. So, I said, the reason you're able to do all those things still is because someone made a political decision at some stage to allow you to do so. You understand that, which then influenced regulation and legislation. They go, oh, really? And now all of a sudden they're interested. What do you mean? How does that work? And then that's how you, like I said, I ask people to find out what their member of parliament or candidates in the area are actually genuinely interested in, and back those people.
Sounds like a good bit of advice. I mean, there was that Brian Boyle said something very similar. Well, he said when we were talking to him, he said, Parliament either makes laws for people to do the right thing, or they do make laws because people do the wrong thing. And so, for hunting, we want laws that are about promoting good hunting rather than retrospective laws that limit things because of a bad activity or bad outcome. We don't want to be limited. We actually want the laws to actually be a positive law and to promote it. So get involved at some level. Yeah,
I think more and more people are becoming interested in change. We've noticed it. I've noticed it over the last 5, 6, even 10 years that people are really starting to think, and maybe that's because as I've got older, the people that I associate with and talk to on a day-to-day basis are maturing, and they're starting to take more of an interest in it. Maybe it's an age thing, but certainly you get a lot of club members coming through now, and they're asking what they can do to improve things and how to go about it. And I've been super surprised at the change in the language around
one thing we can all learn from Ian. Having a look at the rise of the Greens and the Teals here, and they're all built off environmental policies, these two parties, and what the Greens did well when they're building is it's an ideology, it's a movement. They're pushing a movement. It doesn't matter. Like most people wouldn't even know the name of their candidate, but they want to vote for someone that wears that badge that says they're going to look after the environment. Now, they're not the only ones that have environmental credentials here. And there are good people out there that are trying to do the things that we do. And I think we all have a responsibility of creating that good movement. And like I said, then backing political parties that are happy to stand for that movement.
Yeah, that's it. But that's their brand and what they've got into, and so that's where the point of influence is coming for them. I mean, in terms from a personal point of view, when we talk about environmental policy in the Greens, I don't generally associate good environmental policy in the Greens. I certainly associate environmental activism and environmental opinion, but I don't necessarily associate good policy. But unfortunately, getting back to that idea is that if you live in inner city Brisbane or inner city anywhere and your connection with the environment is what you see through TV or social media, then those kind of things make sense. There's often, for instance, I saw that one of the I think it was Namibia or one of the foreign ministers was in the UK to argue against the ban on trophy hunting. And, was saying, like, guys, once upon a time you used to tell us how to live, and that got called colonialism. So now you're telling us how to live again. It's kind of the same thing. You're repeating yourself. You're not saying, well, maybe we know how to actually run our own show, and we might understand, the differences between, and kind of getting back to that croc thing, crocs might be okay at Australia Zoo, but if there's one in the back creek and you're worried about what's going to, going down to your clothesline or your pets or your kids, then it becomes a different kind of crocodile all of a sudden, And I'm sure if you're a landowner in South Africa and you hear someone complaining about feral pigs and you've got a herd of elephants going through there, you probably go, yeah, I wish I had feral pigs because I've got 10 tons worth of feral pigs coming through every night.
Yeah.
So that idea of that, if you're on the ground and you've got involvement and understanding, that actually means something. It can't simply be an academic.
I love this
observation of everything.
Queensland in particular is too big for one set of rules, and you've got people that live in the southeast corner that create rules for the whole of Queensland. And not only are we at different developmental stages throughout the state, We're also at different areas can have different problems, whether it's pest management or feral pest management, or in this case, crocodiles. You can't say, this is how we're going to manage crocodiles from the inner city Brisbane officers when they've never lived in an area where once you swam in the creeks and fished in the creeks without a worry of a crocodile. Now you wouldn't go 3 foot in front of the water. It's, those people just don't understand it. And unfortunately, they're making a lot of the rules for us.
Crazy, isn't it?
I did have a conversation once with the lady now as a minister in the Labor government in Queensland. And she said, Nick, this is very early in my political career. She said, no, I just don't understand North Queenslanders. What do they want? And I said, to be left alone. We know we don't have the ballet every night playing in the middle of Beela Wheeler, or, you don't have the, they call it up in the middle of the Daintree rainforest, a new football stadium going up. But we want to go fishing where we want to go fishing. We want to go hunting where we want to go hunting. We just want to be left alone. That's why we live here in regional Queensland and different parts of the state. Yep.
So look, I think there's a great many people in the southeast who are exactly the same opinion. That we just I was having a similar conversation, and it's like there's certain things I think make good citizens. So, for instance, if the person is in front of you and they're driving 40 in the 60 zone, just chill out. They might be lost, they might be doing all sorts of things. It might be bothering the hell out of you, but chill out.
No one's going to die.
Just slow it back down, and that's a good citizen. But it's also a good citizen for a government to say, yeah, I trust you. You've done the license. Here it is. That idea of that overreach that we feel, I think, and unfortunately, living in a high population area, overreach is greater because it's there. But there's in my local area, there's a sustainability group, and I kind of half being a bit of a mongrel went, oh, well, yeah, there's some deer up in the hill there. We can go get them and we have a great feed. And, what? That's not sustainability. Oh, actually, it is. But, it's just as sustainable as growing tomatoes on the local, the open common. But it's you get that very different view about
and also reminding them, of course, that deer is also not a native animal. It's actually a feral pest in many instances, and if we can harvest that resource and use it for whether it's venison or whatever, we should have that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, there's a pest is a sunk loss. It just costs us, If it's turned into something that actually has a level of value, whatever that is, then all of a sudden it's not a sunk loss. You can actually do something with it. Weeds are the same. A weed is a weed, but if it's something you go, okay, we could do something with this, all of a sudden it changes. And to me, that's sustainability. Saying, okay, this thing, what can we do with it? Okay, we can either spend a hell of a lot of money trying to get rid of it, and if you look at historically, there is no four-legged or two-legged vertebrate that we've got rid of once it comes to Australia. There isn't one. We haven't got it.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, so in South Africa, there was recently a court case where the South African government wanted to make trout. So trout's an introduced species in South Africa, but it is obviously in the waterways now, and it's been there for over 100 years, and they wanted to eradicate them and say that was a pest. So there was a court case that all the fishermen and farmers and all that took the national government to court to classify the fish, to say it's been here for over 100 years. It's as close to being native as it can be, and it's an asset, and we're making money from it. There's significant investment made, and people travel all over the world to come and fish the trout here. And the government lost that. They actually said it's been here for over 100 years.
I get that.
As close to being native as it can be. Let's embrace it. Let's use it.
There's more deer, and the deer have been here for longer than most of us Queenslanders.
Yeah. So we should really be embracing it.
They were kind of gifted to us by the boss.
Yeah, and that was in the 1800s. So they've been here for a lot longer.
So one question I would like to ask in regards to anyone that's had, I guess, a deeper understanding of how New South Wales manages their hunting. Now, one thing that we did come up against in Queensland when we were talking about hunting in state forests was an unallocated state land was a lot of our state forests and unallocated state land in Queensland are grazing pastures. It's been split up through grazing leases. How are they managing that in New South Wales so that the lease holders are working closely with those that have then access through the hunting scheme?
So maybe the way to explain it is under the R license. Do you have just before you go? Yeah, do you understand the license system and stuff? Yeah, don't want to jump over that. But basically, once you have you have the R license, so you go through the process and you get the R license, and you want to go hunting. So I want to hunt Nundle State Forest, for instance. I'll look at Nundle State Forest, and now Nundle State Forest is probably best described as a system of state forests that are all bolted together. So it's a fairly significant chunk of land. And in that, it will say you can hunt here, but you can't hunt here. And the reason you generally can't hunt there is it's a lease or it's being used. So for Nundle's a good example because forestry Nundle State system is a active forestry system. That's right. So if you're there, there's logging trucks going down the road. So it's the way they've worked it is that there's various reasons why you might not be able to access all of the forest. It might be leasehold, it might be actively being worked, it might be classed as a slightly different thing. So when you go to Pilliga, for instance, there's state forest bolted to national park, so you can't go there. And then there's this old area that's like a conservation area right in the middle. You can't go there. And over here we've got the Santos Wells working, so there's a ring around the well. So it's basically saying, yes, this forest is kind of like a multi-use. So if you were to look at grazing, obviously it's got to be size, but even if a farmer has grazing, the farmer's got 10,000 acres as an example, as a grazing a lease off the state government. Fair enough. But really, is there cattle over that 10,000 acres? Is there cattle? Is that whole paddock covered in cattle? Or is your farmer using that like most cattle people using it, different times and using it for different situations? So and that changes every three. So that, and the farmer doesn't go, I don't know but it's every 3 months. So every 3 months they do it quarterly. That's just the way they do it. So if I go to hunt, so I was hunting down there a month ago. That is only that information is only current until the end of that quarter, and then there'll be another map, and it will look different. So, for instance, with using the Pilliga again, one time I was there was this weird corridor running through, which was where they were surveying for the inland rail. And they just said, you can't hunt this here, okay? Because why? And when you went there was no one there. No. Because, there's not guys surveying 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But they're just saying this is a corridor where people will be working. So you just need to not go into that corridor. And that's the other thing that's the answer.
New South Wales, our licence hunting is predominantly in forestry land, like forestry lease, right? So it's New South Wales Forestry Corp, and they have the final say, basically. So yes, the DPI run the hunting program, but forestry have the parts, and if forestry got to send a work crew in, they update the DPI. The DPI then can call you on the spot and say, your hunt is now cancelled. There is not enough hectares available for 30 hunters that we had yesterday. Today it's changed. Those that booked last are no longer, your permit's cancelled, and they call you. They then can update the maps inside the quarterly rotation, and just say, hey, that bit's out. During the raw this year, the prime hunting period up there, the raw and the rut, they had very active forestry in there. They had lots of forestry crews, and sometimes those forestry crews were working within 100 metres of the boundary of hunting, right? So they had these other rules available as well that basically say if there are forestry crews working, you have to give them X amount of distance of coverage, et cetera, and that's written on your permit. And there's also other components of it that say you're allowed to hunt hares, rabbits, dogs, pigs, goats, deer, but you are not allowed to hunt any species of domestic animal like sheep, cows, etc., etc. more than once I've come across cows in the bush. More than
Sheep
once
in the
I've
bush.
come across deer in the bush. Oh, not
Sheep.
deer, sheep in the bush. As hunters, we know to leave them alone. Right?
So
we can work harmoniously with whoever has access to the land at the same time.
the way to kind of
And we'd be stupid not to.
the way to kind of think about it is it's very much like a driving license. It's like, here are the road rules, to this place, here are the rules. And those rules may change, and we will update you. And so, for instance, when, for instance, there's a fire ban, you can't hunt at all. So that's it. You just can't go in, guys. And you go, okay, sure. And, you've got to go on to the forest. Again, one of the things I really like about the New South Wales system is there is an onus on you to be a grown-up. Okay, so that's right. I got my license. You said I can drive, I can buy a car. Now I'm a grown-up. If I break it, you ping me. But what you don't do is you don't kind of, there's no one in the passenger seat going,
and it's not a right to have
leaning over, grab a
an
steering
R
wheel.
license, just like a vehicle license. It can be taken there.
And when we were down there, when we were down there, and again, another interesting thing that, again, when you talk to people about public land hunting and they kind of go, it's about the danger type thing, the risk, which honestly hasn't played out. I mean, playing footy is far more dangerous, literally, statistically, is that you'll meet people there who aren't on the R license, but who are just as, have just as much right to be there. So you'll meet guys riding motorbikes, and you'll meet, there's quite a few stories about meeting Polish bloody mushroom pickers in the foragers there's also this Nundle being gold. There's fossicking going on in there as well. And I got a mate who we hunt with out of Simon out of Toowoomba. He's
Mark,
mad king.
I just had a
guy.
recollection
You know,
of the
so he
half
goes,
clothed French backpackers on the Thorsbourne Trail that we came across. So, yeah, you're right. You never know what you're going to find in the bush.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. So, you get all of these kind of things and you just go, okay, sure. There's people over there riding horses. There's people over there riding motorbikes.
From a safety perspective, though, and Mark's talked about this a number of times, hunters are those that want to be as far
from
away
people.
from all
That's
of
right.
those people as possible. So you actually bumping into them in the bush is very rare.
Yeah.
But in the the public park, or where there's long drop toilets and camping areas,
The reality is most of the animals will run away from those people that are making noise anyway.
They're generally very interested in what we're doing.
That's it. That's one of those really.
The memes suggest that the deer hang out at your campsite once you've left it.
That is so true.
That's a really important. That's a really important point about it.
That's smart. They could read a book, I reckon, sometimes.
That's it. That's an important point. When people talk about, the risk aspects, look, I'm a national park user. I don't want anyone with a gun near me. You know what? I don't want to be near you with a gun because you're a noisy, smelly, metal clanging backpacker. You're going to be here. I'm going to be so far away from you because that's where all the animals are. And that's another thing. I've hunted pilliga, which is a big chunk of dirt, for a number of years. And I can count literally on my hands the time I've met people who are, for want of a better word, tourists or non-park users. Nundle's different because it's close to, Tamworth, and it's got a really good reputation. There's a lot of people there, but you go to somewhere like Pilliga twice or once. There's an old campground that we actually use that is kind of in disrepair. And once a guy and his wife in an RV turned up, and they said, well, they looked at us and they said, look, we actually said, if you go down this road about an hour, there's a much better, nicer campsite with drop toilets and that stuff. And we ended up being, quasi tourist guides for them. And another time we were in there and there was a guy who was just doing his big tours on his motorbike. But other than that, you don't see anyone because they don't want, it's not, the rocks, or it's not Noosa National Park. It's not the glamorous stuff. We want the scrungy, dirty where all the game is.
To your previous point though about, a lot of the greenies or activists showing up and, being a real right pain, an open day on duck season and those sorts of things and doing the wrong thing. The R license system just hasn't got those issues because it's an open year. It's, you don't give an activist a date to show up and ruin the party because it's an all year round thing. So it sort of made all that noise disappear as well.
Literally for me to hunt Nundle, it's a 7-hour drive. So that's usually a couple of fuel stops, and I spend lots and lots of money once across the border because that's basically when you start. After you've done your 3 hours, you think, I'm thinking about getting something to eat now, and you're going into a part of even technically a busy forest like Nundle. You don't see generally anyone other than people who are free camping. So doing tourism, doing traveling, and they're free camping because you can do that in a state forest. You don't see many of those people, but you see some of those people. But, again, in Nundle, the majority of people, or you don't really see them, but the majority of activity we saw was logging trucks going past our camp, in the morning because they were pulling timber out and we'd go up the road and we'd give them a wave and we'd go past them because that was an exclusion zone. We weren't allowed to go there. We'd go past them and go 10 Ks up the road.
I know there'll be Queenslanders that haven't got a full understanding of what happens in New South Wales that would really benefit from listening to this and as part of the podcast today, because people need to have be educated on how it works in other states so that they can properly advocate for it in Queensland. Because like I said, we did get some negative feedback from some people that just didn't understand how the R license worked in New South Wales, for example. And then when we tried to explain it to them, they didn't seem to have a problem with it. But, the more people that are educated, the better it is for us all. Yeah.
And in Queensland, to me, it's kind of, there'll be more air gaps between people and hunters. There's a Crown land or whatever we want to call it. Let's call it public land. On the other side of the dividing range,
that's right.
The population starts getting pretty thin pretty quick. And then you go, okay, I'm here at this particular location.
Exactly.
There is no one else here. I'm the only one here. Yep.
So, before we wrap this up, and there might be one or two other topics we cover.
Let's do it.
We always ask some seriously tough questions.
Yeah, we've warmed you up.
So these are rapid fire, hard hitting questions for people to get to know Nick the man. And I'll kick off with the first one, and that is when you're on the road, traveling, around your areas. Will you?
Oh, there's so many good coffee shops up and down the coast here in the Hinchinbrook Electorate. You don't have to drink shit, mate.
Boom, boom.
Good answer.
Okay.
Mark?
So if we're hunting and I say, do you want a sandwich? And I say, do you want a ham and cheese sandwich? Does that mean immediately that
well, if
you
it was a
mean
ham, cheese and tomato
tomato
sanger, I'd pull the tomato off.
There you go. There we go.
Absolutely.
So when a man says ham and cheese, he means ham and cheese.
All right. Once you've burnt the roof of your mouth with that tomato and you're cruising on
probably
down the road,
something. Let me think. There's probably a little bit of AC/DC or something on one of the local radio stations on one of the rock channels here.
Us.
Okay.
Very good.
Nice. Good.
I got one more while the others are thinking of it. If you were to recommend a book to the listeners, and that doesn't need to be hunting related, but just
there's one I think everyone should read. It's a book called Blue Ocean Strategies, and it's all about basically bringing yourself out of a market and into a market where you don't have too many competitors. So, and it's not completely reinventing and coming up with new ideas sometimes. Sometimes it's changing the idea you have so you don't have a competitor anymore. So Circus du Soleil is one of the first examples they used in this book. And for example, so circuses, they were a dying breed. People didn't want to go and see the animals anymore, low value customer. But they didn't want to kill off the idea of circus altogether. So they went for a different market, someone that's willing to spend, $300 on a ballet ticket. So therefore you had to bring the production up, got rid of the animals. They were hard to look after, those sorts of things. So eventually they created a new product that was no longer in the market of the rest of their competitors. So Blue Ocean Strategy is something that everyone should read. Yeah. Yep.
Good one.
I like that a lot.
That's good.
I've written that one down.
Oh, geez. You haven't had ABC Jamba microphone in your face, gentlemen. That wasn't hard at all.
No, true enough. We haven't. We have a friend who's been on the podcast who unfortunately is often one of the ones they knock on his door. He can tell you some stories about that, but no, we haven't had that yet.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, just before we close off, if there's is there anything we haven't covered, Nick, that you'd like to discuss?
I think we touched on it earlier today, but I think everything's strength in numbers. I've recently got my Category H firearm, my pistol license, and I didn't get it because I want to give up every other recreational activity I've got so I can go and become the best pistol shooter in the world. But I think when it comes to things like those sorts of activities, the more people that get involved in it or hold those licenses, the better. That's why I got into getting my pistol license. You don't want to get to a stage, at any stage, where the government looks at even hunters, for example. There isn't too many hunters in Queensland. They don't have their voice heard. So we might just put a line through their sport. Who's it really going to upset? So I encourage people, if you're involved in an activity, whether it's sports, shooting, hunting, or whatever it is, get involved with the local association, join a club, get involved, make sure that you're doing it in an organised manner, because that's what keeps the government on guard. Yep. Yeah, I love the term, the world is run by those that show up. Yep.
Yeah.
Legend.
I think that's the title of this one.
Yep, very good. All right. Mark, did you want to wrap up?
You can do it, Ian, if you don't mind. I'm writing down this: the world is run by those who turn up.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. But look, I'm just going to say, Nick, it's been a great chat. It's been a little bit of time coming and organising it, but it's been really interesting. It's always fun to talk to someone about what goes on in the world outside of planning a hunt and going out hunting, because there's lots to this subject. But there's certainly a lot of people that advocate for us. And as you said, if you're sitting at the bar and someone wants to come over and have a chat to you about not necessarily politics, but you just got to remember sometimes that someone's done a lot of hard work behind you to allow you to do the things.
And it just doesn't happen. That's right. There's a lot of people out there working in the background to protect the lifestyle that we have right now. So it's good to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Mate, thank you very much for your time. I know you're a busy man, and it's been really quite enlightening. I must admit, really given me a couple of things to think about. And I think the world is run by those who turn up is going to be the title.
I'm glad you're all able to get something out of today's chat, because I certainly did, and I hope the listeners will enjoy the topics we hit. And, Jono, I'm looking forward to trying this snake sausage at some stage with entrails. It sounds...
Yeah.
Excellent. It slices off a bit like salami.
Oh, yeah. Make sure we'll make sure you get to try that.
Legend.
Just make it look like
thanks
a
a lot, gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure.